Good morning, 1984. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with this guy that worked at the National Security Agency of the United States of America. He was going on and on about how he'd gotten into the military only because his father had been in the military and he didn't perceive himself as having a choice. And I was trying to say, man, if I knew you when you were a kid, I would have shown you a bunch of choices. Just because your parents don't, have a clue doesn't mean you have to not have a clue. And he said, I say that because I know way too many people who are attorneys because their parents told them to be attorneys, people who married people they didn't want to marry because their parents told them to, people who joined the military because their parents wanted them to. I know cops who are cops because their parents told them they had no choice but to be cops. And I'm just really tired of hearing people blame their parents for the decisions they made in their life because they should have told their parents to off. And, you know, your life is your own. And just because someone is stupid enough to breed in captivity doesn't mean you have to be stupid and follow them like sheeple, right? So, I believe in honoring good parents, but good parents they show you the way, but they don't force you to follow their own path, right? So this guy is going blah 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 because he's in the military and now he works at the NSA, and or at least he did then. And I said, well, don't you know that the director of 1980, the director of the NSA is the director of 1984? And I consider people like, well, there's a guy named Michael that used to be the director there, and I love the guy, and just there's plenty of really fine people at the NSA. I'm one of the only American citizens who's also a freedom-loving renegade who says I have friends at the NSA. But here goes. So this guy says, "What's 1984?" Full stop. Mic drop. Yeah, boom. And he says, "I said." The book. He said, "Well, yeah, I know that's the title of some book, but I've never read it." I said, if you work at the National Security Agency, I demand you read 1984. You're working for 1984. And so the guy says, well, okay. And he's the sort of person, he's a real fast reader. He reads things, just very, very quickly. And so the very next time we spoke, he said he read it in one sitting. And he said, oh my God, thank you, Nancy, for making me read 1984. I had no idea. He said, it's here. This year is 1984. Every year is 1984. I said, yeah, I know. He said, we're already doing all that. It's not like some dystopia in the future. He said, in every instance of that totalitarian context, the United States is already doing to people and probably selling the technology to do it to other people all over the world, to other governments. He said the drugs, the massive ubiquitous surveillance. He said, I'm going to quote now, forgive me, but don't shoot the Messiah, otherwise known as the messenger. The word Messiah just means messenger. I'm not trying to say I'm the grand leader of all this, but he said, the he said the National Security Agency could even look up somebody's derriere. Well, excuse me, that's some kind of camera. What are you trying to talk about? What are you saying? He said the NSA could order a doctor, even if a civilian doctor who's never been in the military, to order someone to get or to, recommend or whatever, that someone get a proctoscope exam. And then they can hack the equipment so that they get to look up people's stuff. And I said, well, that's a little bit too much. That's what we call TMI, too much information. And he said, sorry, but really, he said, we've done that. Oh, God have mercy, I'm about to cry. Oh, outside it's America. Outside it's America. You too wrote that song, and I always heard it, and I thought it was very beautiful. But what the song is actually about is the ubiquitous um, triumph of this kind of technology and this kind of surveillance and this kind of pervasive control outside its America is a very, very, very sad thing to say. Sometimes I still believe in the real America, the ideal that was supposedly based on freedom and individual liberties. So then I ask him, what kind of drugs are you talking about that the government is basically distributing to make people sheep and dazed and confused and controllable and docile? Is it? I said, is it Adderall? Is it the ADHD drugs? The overdiagnosis of kids with attention deficit disorder that all the only thing a lot of those kids have is creativity and intellect and rambunctiousness that is native to youth. He said that he said Adderall is definitely one of them. The ADHD drugs are part of it, and you're right about the overdiagnosis of both children and adults with all kinds of psychological diseases that we then prescribe things for. But he said antidepressants are ubiquitously used to change people's consciousness and make them more susceptible to mind control. That explains the 400-page small print 3-inch thick book that I read when I was in graduate school and studying psychology and behavioral medicine. And it was all about the side effects of antidepressants. 400 pages of side effects for these drugs? Come on. And he went on telling me other types of drugs. And I said, and then there's the street drugs like cocaine and heroin. And a lot of people are using marijuana that is probably dosed with heroin or fentanyl or something else. In Los Angeles, I know of the Glendale Police Department shut down a Sherman Oaks, helped the Sherman Oaks Police, the LAPD, shut down a marijuana collective years ago. I think it was around 2009, 2010. Excuse me, that was uh, putting powdered heroin in the marijuana to make people addicted to it so that they'd come in and be, docile sheep who handed over all their money and got drugged with something they weren't even aware that they were buying. Same thing happened at a Venice collective about 2 years ago. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, there was another collective in Culver City that was shut down primarily because they were putting something like PCB or something in there, PCP, I believe it's called. And for what it amounts to, it might have been sodium pentothal. People were saying things they would never say. People were revealing secrets they would never reveal. People were sending out email and making phone calls and texts that were way too personal and too truthful. And so the police got so many reports from people who were smoking marijuana, or so they thought, but they said, whatever this stuff is, that's not all that it is. There's something in this. So I just need people to be aware that some guy from the United States federal government admitted that United States federal agencies are involved in the ubiquitous drugging of our culture. And part of it is marijuana. Left to its own devices, ganja is probably a very holy thing. It's probably routinely harmless, and it does certainly have medical benefits that cannot be denied. But when it is bought and sold and utilized in these collectives that are partly now run by the government, or at least sanctioned by the government, they're paying the taxes, they're paying the man. Some of the things that people are purchasing under the guise of cannabis are actually doctored with some much harsher things that can be utilized to control their behavior. So I just wanted to tell you about that conversation that I had with some guy that works at the NSA because it was really very, very informative. And he was so apologetic. He was almost crying. He was just saying, "Oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. The director of the agency I work for is the director of 1984." This is Nancy Love, otherwise known as Justifiably Outraged Love. More later. I'm just getting started here.